I'm not crazy about them. I'll continue. Yeah.
Oh.
For 40 years, I've walked the line between worlds and am well versed in death. But I want to have faith in humans. Give me something to believe in. Earth below me, sky above me, fire within me. Brought to you by UPRN Network. I'm Trish Moe, and this is The Missing Piece.
Good evening, world. Um, I'm your host, Trish, and this is The Missing Piece. We are broadcasting live on 105.3 FM New Orleans. Or actually, I've been corrected so many times today as I was talking about pronunciation. So some of you there would say, I think it's Nolans, right? um, and I do want to thank, before I forget, Carnation as well as the network for sponsoring my show. I also want to thank all of you for joining us tonight, and most importantly, I have Dave here, which it's been a while. Gosh, it was a few months. He is a biologist, astrologer, offers spiritual guidance, and an Oak Island. So, welcome back, Dave. It's good to see you again.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Trish. Great to be back.
There was a weird lag in the. There's
Yeah,
always
okay.
my
Great
show.
to be
I
back. I
people
appreciate it.
are probably at my entry here, like my me screwing up the intro. There is always. I mean, they're probably used to that though. So well, I do want to say before we were talking about candy just now, and that reminded me. I don't watch the news, but I briefly saw something about the factory in Pennsylvania exploding. So, we do have a lot of hosts on our network from Pennsylvania's, and of course, I do um, want to reach out to those those families that were affected by that. I know there were still some people missing. There were some that lost their lives. I also want to send my condolences to the families of the tragedy today in Nashville. Eh, Um, I was made aware of that around 1 o'clock right after it happened. There was another school shooting, and then all of the tornadoes in California. Well, I guess both coasts are getting hit right now, but so to anyone affected or their families, we do send our thoughts and condolences. It's even though those things are happening more and more, it's still always it dumbfounded when I hear about those things because it's crazy to me, that those things still happen. But so tonight, I'm gonna pick Dave's mind, I think. What have you been working on lately? What projects have you got going on?
Well, I think I started my own podcast a few months back. I guess it was probably in December, and it's really casual and informal. I just invite people that I like and can have good conversations, intelligent people. And we just talk about whatever. And I kind of always wanted to do that because, like, the pace that I like to have is different than a lot of people. I like a fairly moderate to fast pace. I like a lot of facts and data and stuff. There's a lot of show. We were just talking about this, Trish. There's a lot of shows. It's everyone has a different cup of tea, obviously. There's a lot of shows. There's a lot of opinions being thrown around, and I'm okay with that. But
Yes.
like, I'm also a scientist, so I want to see something backing that up. And I want to see credibility. Do you actually know what you're
Hmm.
talking about? Do other people, would other people agree? Yeah, they know what they're talking about. Listen to what they're saying, because then at least if they have an opinion, it's probably a fairly decent opinion, and I'm going to be interested in listening to that. So I've endeavored to make a show of that manner where I can actually do it the way I want to do it. Which is it's based in data and facts. And also I'm trying to figure things out. Like at the end of the show, I don't want to be like, oh, I wonder what that is. No, I want to take my best guess, educated guess about what I think is going on. I don't want to leave it open ended.
And where can we find your podcast?
It's on YouTube. I've got a YouTube channel. It's really easy to find. It's under my name. You guys can see my name on the screen. It's under Dave Petrella. Please subscribe if you're interested in the content. And then I've also got my Facebook page and my Instagram page.
Is it broadcast on any of the other podcast stations at the moment?
Which ones are you referring to?
Oh, I mean, gosh, there's like SoundCloud or Podbean
Oh
or
no,
um
no, it's just
like
YouTube for now.
actual listening. Okay, I see.
Hmm.
So that's I've been throwing the idea around of my blog like I was talking about, but I'm thinking of just keeping them on like one or two channels because there's so many and it's overwhelming sometimes to keep up
Oh
with
yeah.
that all. So
Well, what's really irritating
but
to
yes,
me is that I like to spend as little time with technology as possible. I think you can probably understand what I'm talking about.
me too.
So,
Everybody knows that. I don't do
right.
marketing stuff.
Yeah, so when I do a show, people know I'm casual and informal, and we like to actually come to conclusions on my show, when I talk about things. And so I'm basically like, I want to spend my time with the material in the show. So I finish a show and then I do like a 10 or 15-minute description so people understand where to find people, what it's about, all that kind of stuff, links. And then I just post it and I leave it. And then I go pick up my book because I have a lot of stuff to do, like research. I research every day, much like yourself, I think.
I do. It's
Hmm.
never ending. And I never go back. There's some people, which I get, I get the a lot of people don't like doing podcasts or anything that aren't kind of pre-recorded and scripted and things like that. I get that. That's fine. For me, I would never put any information out ever because um I either just want to like go all in or I wouldn't do it at all. I would be too critical of myself, I think. So I don't even go back and watch my own shows like ever, ever. So I better be taking notes when I do talk, which I usually do,
Hmm.
when I do talk to people because it's not something just like you said. When I'm done with it, yes, I continue research on those subjects. I continue talking to those people, etc. But I'm not I'm not the technical,
Right, yeah.
type. But I've heard this come up recently, numerous times actually, and a few months ago, I started putting together a fact-based, which I'll probably just include in my blog, um, list of resources of credible science journals, things like that, because not all of them are credible. A lot of people think that just because something comes from what they think is a government website or a medical research facility, things like that, that it's actually fact-based and credible. And many of them are not. And but that wasn't known before. A lot of those things are just coming to light now. And so there's so much I think there's more misinformation, especially on the internet. And now with AI, because AI just scrubs the internet for information. It's not checking facts, you know. And so I think that is something in the future that a lot of people need to be made aware of. It's just like it's like news channels, half of them, some of them might be true, some of them probably, most of them probably aren't. And I even learned that with doctors through medical things, which I'm sure um, you have more knowledge on those fields than I do. But um, just with Lyme disease, like I did so much research based on what doctors had books they had written and such, and until I came across one of a doctor who actually experienced Lyme disease and then wrote about it. And he said everything he had studied was completely false. So that just goes to show, like I guess, where knowledge comes from, and in those areas, science and health and things.
Yeah, and that one in particular is particularly suspicious because, of course, of the island that's associated with. And by the way, I'm from Connecticut, so
Yeah,
I've been to Lyme before. I actually went to college on the shore, really close to Lyme. So I know the area. I kind of know the energy and stuff like that, which is very important when you're trying to understand things that happen around there. But we know, and you know more about this probably than I do. I haven't read the story in a while, but we know there was like a biological or microorganism testing facility
hmm
just offshore of Lyme, Connecticut. So you're telling me, and I, this is the stupidity factor. I just can't do this stuff. I've never been able to do that. There's fairly easy connections I feel to make between certain things. So okay,
yes,
so you've got the whole world, right? Even just talking about America, you've got all of the country, and you're telling me that Lyme disease just randomly appeared right across the water from like a massive testing facility for biological agents or warfare
right.
agents or whatever, and they were doing animal testing, and oh, it's not related. Yeah, no, no,
So
it's
so
related.
what
We
I
know it's related.
found, yes, and then so I had it before in my life. I tested positive for active Lyme in Manhattan, Kansas, which, for those of you that don't know, is where that research facility that Dave's referring to moved to, which shouldn't be anywhere within hundreds of miles of civilization or animals for that matter. So they put it right in the middle of the U.S. In the amongst all the livestock that they have at K State and all of those research centers. So I got it there, an active case, but then they discovered that I had antibodies, that I had had it before, which I had moved here from New York. So then that sent up a red flag to the environmental department, because of course I had lived in both places, about a mile from the center in Kansas, and that's my house was, and then very close to um, the ones in New York. And so that's that goes to show also that, like, I'm living proof that it's not like I just got it randomly in another country or another state. No, I got it right by both locations of that. But in my research, I discovered that Lyme disease has actually been around um, since the beginning of time. I mean, they've discovered it um, in different, like, animals from thousands of years ago. So I don't think it was something new, but I do think that it's something that they brought back intentionally. Re um I guess in
Like
their
reintroduced,
experiments.
probably.
Right, reintroduce that.
Yeah, because you can do a fairly easy, a targeted release. And of course I've done a lot of research, especially back in high school and yeah, I'd say high school and early college. I've done a lot of like biological field work. So you see things and you set up grids and stuff, and you put up fences to try to like quarantine the different animal species, and then you kind of count and collect what it ends up in the. There's one in particular I'll never forget. It was I think it was in Eastern Connecticut, maybe. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Eastern Connecticut, and I was just getting into biology at this point, so I had I didn't even have like a good conceptual basis of why you would set up a grid like that, how that works in terms of like spatially. But what it is that they were, I think they were going to build a factory there, and you have to take like a survey or an assay of the microorganisms and but let's say mostly the biological species, like the flora and fauna that's there. So in several cases, there's some endangered species in that area, and you have to make sure you're not infringing upon any of that stuff with the laws and regulations. So you set up a grid, and what they did, well, really what we did, I didn't put the fence up, but there's kind of like a black plastic fence. It's probably about 2 feet tall, and they ran it maybe, oh, I don't know, I'm trying to remember, at least 100 feet. It might have been a little bit more than that, in a straight line. And then across an area. I think it was across the threshold of like a field at the point where the field meets the forest, which is, there's terms for that. I can't remember what it is, but it's where the different like ecosystems they interact with each other. And
Mm-hmm.
inside of that fence, we put big white pails or big white buckets dug into the ground, maybe 2 feet down. But like the Home Depot style, like the big ones, not orange, but they were white ones. The big pails, probably like a 10 or 20
Okay.
gallon bucket. I don't know, something like that. And then what happens is over the course of the night, when it was mostly like insects. There were some voles and moles and stuff like that as well. I think there was at least one snake. I remember that too. It's amazing the amount of animals. So they're trying to migrate from the field. I think this is what it was, from the field into the forest during the nighttime, and they have to cross this barrier. And they're not looking at, oh, there's going to be a fence here. Humans are the only people that would do that crap. So they're just assuming, oh, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to go into the woods. They hit the
Right.
fence and they fall into the pail, and the pails are probably like 3 feet apart from each other. So it's high likelihood there's a lot of them. And then you kind of count what's down there and you see what's going on. So what I'm getting at is that these things have been studied, or they're still constantly studied. And if you can correlate, let's say, like population patterns and population movement with and God forbid you're trying to target with some kind of a biological weapon like a population or something. Okay, so now we know where they move, and we have this handy thing that's already been throughout, like you're saying, Trish, throughout all of history, throughout a lot of history, and it's easy to get into ticks.
Mm-hmm.
And ticks, they reproduce incredibly fast, and it's not something where
Yes.
people would probably have less concern for the organism rather than like something like a mammal or something like that. They're like, yeah, we'll just put it in there and we'll
Mm-hmm.
just spread it, and they'll be all across New England like in like 1 year. So I'm sorry that we have to think about things this way, but look, I mean, if the shoe fits, so what I always say, it's like I didn't do it, but I'm trying to bring understanding to what
Right.
possibly could have happened. And it doesn't look good. It doesn't look
Well,
good.
and
I'm
the
sorry.
government has there's numerous now with all of the declassified that are coming being released in the last 10 15 years. There were numerous projects like that between in the 70s 80s era, probably starting in the 60s for that matter, um, that where the military did drop. I know there's one where they dropped probably millions of mosquitoes, I believe it was, um, over, I don't know if it was South Carolina, Georgia, somewhere in the South. They did it with ticks. Another place, they even released an entire a virus over San Francisco just to see how fast it would spread. And this was done from the ticks and the mosquitoes and such were done from airplanes from the military. I mean, they admit it. It's right there. So how many, we already know that and the mosquitoes were infected with things like malaria. You know, how quickly does that spread to your water, everything, to livestock? Um, so they've already admitted all of that. It's right there. That's one, I guess, that baffles me. Um, people, you can give people all of the information. You can give them proof, absolute proof, and still it's blind. They're blind to it. Like, don't believe any.
Yep.
Okay. So, so where do you go from there?
I think a lot of it, what I've learned through the years, especially the past like 3 years when things got super weird. I mean, they've always been weird to me, ever since I've been on this planet. But I mean, I think we all know what I'm referring to back in 2020. Um, then I started to notice more of the dimensional shifting and stuff like that, and especially timelines. And I
Yes.
think that a lot of people, I think probably this is fairly common, probably how it is that you have people in different mental states, which they equate actually end up equating to different dimensional locations. And Trish and me, this is one of our favorite topics, I
Right.
think, talking about dimensions. I love talking about this because I believe it's the key to really understanding the solar system. So I think people are literally locked into their specific dimension, and they may not even have access to. Man, it gets even weirder when you talk about quantum physics, because I
Oh,
don't even
yes.
know I don't even know, and I think I've been thinking about this a lot the past 2 weeks, especially. I literally do not know, and I cannot prove what other people see and hear when they see me and hear me. I see what I see, like when I'm on camera and when I'm
Exactly.
speaking and stuff. I don't know. They may see, and there's actually been lots of proof for me with this. They may be seeing a higher version of me, a higher dimensional version of me, or a
Hmm.
lower dimensional version of me, and that depends on their own quantum state. So it's
And
all thrown
that
out
and
the
none of it
window, you
is
know.
wrong, technically. You know, I've argued this also. Funny you mentioned that. I was just reading over some notes I took about this. Um, because everyone's perception of everything from everyone else's. So technically, you're talking about religion. Technically, there'd be billions of different religions because we all active. But as far as dimensions, I've thought about that. Like, okay, so say something as simple as flat, like the Earth being flat. Okay, coming from, so say you have multiple astronauts. One is really still in like a first or second dimensional body, being, right? Okay. And then the other ones might be in third, fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever. So that person is going to see everything. The world is flat, of course, because that's how they see it. But somebody who sees in 3D and is in that dimension is going to see the world as round. And like in when you break it down in a simple term like that, and then I think what happened, it's kind of, many people think that once you get to anything past the 11th dimension, the 12th, everything's going to start kind of collapsing in on each other. And I honestly think that that's kind of what's happening. And it can be very confusing to people who are on different levels, because it's the same thing, like certain people see UFOs or cryptids or what have you, and others don't in the same area. You could have a whole city of people and only a small percentage witness something that's right there in front of all of them.
Oh yeah,
So um I think,
that's why
like,
we
you're
should
you're
try to
further.
give people. As I say really fast, that's why we should try to give people the benefit of the doubt when they tell a story. This is what I saw, or this is what I
Yes,
experienced. Now, I run their credibility in my head. It's like, do I even find it? If I find the person credible, I'll listen to the whole story. If I don't find them credible, I'll ask them to, I'll give a qualifier. I'm like, dude, you better be telling me the truth, man, because it doesn't feel like you're about to tell me the truth. I may actually say that
right.
to them so they know. Don't mess around. Okay, don't do it. And then when you see them, if you say that before they give the story, then they start stumbling. There's a high chance that they're lying. You know, because like if you're not lying, it's like, dude, I'm just gonna tell you the story. Just listen to what I'm saying. So that's there's ways to do it. I think.
I think there is, but I think, again, there's different, that's a whole other subject because there's different cultures and societal norms. I think as a society, we become accustomed to lying in certain situations. I was listening to a podcast about Roswell earlier, and that was a societal norm for the time. That was in the 40s. Nobody talked about those things. They would be considered crazy, and especially not the government. So when you're asking these officials, what what happened, or of course they're going to lie about it because of fear. Fear is what everything is based on in this world. um Unfortunately, we're kind of growing out of that as a society, but it's still there. It's still there, especially amongst the older generations. But I think, if you start breaking down the levels of the dimensions, like Like, for instance, the zero dimension is just nothingness. And the reason I started thinking about this was because one of my near death experiences, I it's like my whole life went backwards in my head, but then I ended up in this room of nothing, like nothing. Just I wouldn't say, and it wasn't like a void. There's a big difference. This was just it was like I literally went back to the zero dimension, if that makes sense. I mean, I know it doesn't. People who don't know the reality of dimensions, but there was nothing. And so when I started thinking about that, I'm like, okay. So then you start moving up, right? In the next dimension, you you can see pictures and maybe even colors and things, but just it like the flat earth theory, right? And then you get to like the third dimension. You can start um you can move forward, backwards, right? Left, right, things like that. You go up one, you can move forward, backwards, left, right, up, down. You get another direction in your dimensional abilities. Um,
Have you
and
read
that's about.
Flatland, Trish?
I haven't.
Have you? Okay, because Flatland is it was required. Shockingly, I mean, I'm so pleased because I am excited when I can talk about this. It was required reading in my geometry class in high school. It's
It's
like,
probably
wow.
banned now.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it is. I should probably look into that. But it's basically it's all about dimensions and it's saying, I mean, geometry is like the key to the universe, really.
Hmm.
And sound and light and they're all together, but like platonic solids and shapes and how matter condenses, into a physical state, all this stuff. Well, in that book, it talks about yeah, the one okay, well, zero dimension obviously there's nothing. In the first
Right.
dimension, there's a point. And a point does not have it doesn't have width or height or anything like that. It's literally just
Right.
you technically can't really even see it because if you could see it, you would see width and height and stuff. But
Right.
it's like a coordinate is what it is. That's the way to think about it. On an invisible grid. And then the second dimension is a line. And of course, a line you can see because it's 2 points that make a line. But no, there is. And then it's also can be a square or circle or something like that in 2 dimensions. Then there's the third dimension, which is like a third three-dimensional object that has, like you're talking about, height, width, and
A
length.
cube or a sphere.
And then when I started to be like, wow, this is getting, and I was young, and I was like, this is what I've always been looking for this stuff, and finally someone put it in front of me, not even knowing. And the teacher has no clue about, super consciousness and any of this crap. She was, I really appreciated her. She was a very good math. She was very smart at math. And unlike I think a lot of current day teachers who kind of try to fake it and stuff, I'm not trying to judge people or anything. That's from what I've seen. But anyway, so then the fourth is like when it's like a super cube or like a super 2D object where it's composed of like many different say like if you think about a cube, it's like a bunch of those cubes piled together and that makes like one big object and then it keeps expanding like that. But the thing I really want to say about this is that what was the most interesting thing is that they had it's such a creative book, but they had visitors coming down from higher dimensions to their dimension. So they had like
Hmm.
a 3D visitor, and I don't know if it was described as it might have even been described as an angel, which is an angle, angle and angel.
Right.
That's a lot to do with
Yeah.
astrology as well. And the thing is they could only see that object in 2D because when the 3D comes down in the 2D, like it was
Yeah.
literally like the 3D objects hard. It's hard to understand this. You really need to take your time with this book. It's a very short book called Flatland. I highly recommend everyone reads it. It's short, but it would take you some time. But anyway, the 3D object comes basically through the two-dimensional plane. It's because it's on a plane for 2 dimensions. But all they see like the it's actually interesting. Have you ever seen the cross section of a human body when there's being not an autopsy, but you can see it's sliced like all the way down the body, these tiny
Yeah.
slices.
Well,
That's
I
what they
learned
were.
that in drawing also. You know,
Okay.
everything has cross sections, and yeah.
Yeah, so what they saw, that's what they saw basically. They could never see the 3D shape. They saw the 2D shape changing as the 3D object passes through the plane. I know this is probably over some people's heads, but
Well, okay, for this channel, I guess the best thing I think of when you describe it that way is for paranormal investigators. Um, I don't even know the tech. I don't use that equipment, so I don't know what it's called. But the equipment that shows a dotted grid and green lights, and then a stick figure shows up. If it's,
exactly.
if you get, if any type of entity shows up on the camera, and so the stick figure is basically making whatever outline in two dimension, technically, two dimensional. Um, so that's what I think of when you explain it that way, I think. But I think the fourth dimension is where time is introduced. The theory of time, anyways, because time is a human construct, but time in a sense of past and future, a timeline.
Yeah.
Um, and then you get above that to like subatomic dimensions, and where you people can control timelines, and even travel timelines and things like that. And so in throughout, because time travel is not a new theory. that's that's been documented in every culture literally since the beginning of time. So it's just people don't understand it. And I think what you're saying, when people or entities or what have you um ascend in those dimensions and go backwards, that's what we're experiencing. But because we don't understand it and don't know how to uh properly, that we're all about labeling and defining things. I think that's a huge human flaw, actually, just collectively, because we always have to label things, and we always have to, put them in there, define them. And I don't think there's some things like that you can't define.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And what I always do too is I use working conclusions, meaning that this is my absolute best conclusion based on what I had presently or what I previously had. And I'm always willing to augment it if I have to, or even to shift it if I have to. And it also covers my ass, by the way. And that's not why I do it, but it always covers my ass because if someone says, "Oh, well, that doesn't make sense because of this," well, if I can say, "You know what? I actually didn't have the information, and now since you presented that to me, I'm actually going to look at that hard and try to incorporate that and see where that
Yes.
fits in." And then that way, that's how you develop the scientific discipline independently of institutions, trying to force propaganda on the population. Again, this population control idea. That's not most of science today, in my opinion, is not science at all. I literally go, it took, well, I shouldn't say it took that long. I mean, I've always been this way, but I've always been very, as unbiased as possible. And I always felt that even as a kid, that that's the way to be if you want to understand something. So when I go in and, I've done a lot of research. I spent 100 days on the road last summer, actually doing research all across the country. Of course, I went through Kansas and I went all to the Pacific Northwest, which is where I've been spending the winter, doing research. And I'm always shocked and surprised because I go in with, again, it's the scientific method. This is Francis Bacon. I have a lot on him too. And I work with Jake Roberts on his channel, Ghost of Bacon, does an excellent job. But the idea is that you really need to look at, put your hypothesis forward. Absolutely, this is what I think, and then literally remove it out of your head. Totally put it outside of your line of vision and everything. Put it off to the side, and then go in and collect your data. And it's fairly frequently that I'm totally incorrect, and I'm a kind of amused by it. I'm like, and it's no, I wish people could learn this more. It's not a judgment on your necessarily on your character or your ability. It's that you just didn't have the information And it
Mhm.
maybe it wasn't designed according to what you would how you would design it. That doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means that you were lacking information to make that the proper conclusion. So when I go
Right.
in, like here's a really good example. I don't know if we ever talked about this, but Lovelock Cave. This is in Nevada. It's fairly well known. The Paiute Indian tribe essentially talks about there being giants that lived in this cave, and that they were actually cannibalistic giants. And they don't like,
Mhm.
they have a straight face when they talk about it. They're not kidding. They're not kidding. This is
Right.
not like a mythology. This is real to them. And so they had to they actually set a fire at the fire entrance, and they trapped them in there, and I think they died of like smoke inhalation and heat and stuff like that. So you can go to this cave. I really got in over my head this time because it was a 15-mile dirt road, and I was like, and I have a small car. It's like not really made for that. And I basically said, no, you know what? This is so important that I'm going to accept the consequences, whatever they are. So it took me like 2 hours to drive 15 miles, and it was just danger, like washboard, the washboard roads and stuff. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
It's like really bad on your suspension, and there's like sharp rocks and stuff, and there's dust everywhere. I just, I mean, I actually had a signal on my cell phone. Amazingly, I just put on like some music. I put on one of the albums that I hadn't heard in like 20, literally like 20 years. I'm like, all right, I'm going 15 miles an hour, probably maximum, and I just have to wait till I get there. And then I finally got there after like 2 hours, and there's only one other guy there, and we had a pretty good conversation up on the ridge up there because it's actually set up on a like a mountainside or a hillside above a very old lake bed where there used to be it used to be fully full of water, and now you can only seasonally you can see some small patches of water, but it used to be huge lake bed, and the levels of the water were a lot higher. So this cave entrance used to be fairly close, I think, to the actual lake level, and of course now it's like way way down, and it's like it's like been marooned up on the hillside, this cave. So, when you're talking about giants, to me, that's not, and you're talking about cannibalistic giants, that's not a good energy in my book. So I'm drove up there. I'm like, this is interesting. I feel fine, totally fine. The area, I feel okay. I had to hike around the top. I came around the front side of that, and you see the cave entrance. There's a little plaque, and it's actually been featured on Ancient Aliens a few, I think at least once. I think Joe would probably be aware of it, but it talks about the story, and what happened there and everything. And they don't talk. I don't know if they mention in that particular place. I don't know if they mentioned giants. It may have been mentioned before that on the plaque in the parking lot. But in any case, I went in the cave, and there's so much like black soot up on the ceiling. It's like caked on, glossy. It's like amazing. You can't even see the rock anymore from all the fire that the soot had accumulated. And I went in there. I had my EMF detector with me, which is of course a well-known paranormal tool, and I think it can be very effective and helpful. Helped me a lot, and I felt nothing weird at all. And I'm like a built-in biosensor, so I feel all the energy fields, and even if they're very subtle, I feel the stuff around me. I'm like, okay. I just shrug my shoulders. I'm like, great. Great. So now I can tell everyone it's fine, guys. But I say there's one thing. The only thing there were two things that were slightly strange, but they weren't bad or uncomfortable. The first one is that when I came out of the cave, I smelled this really like delicate flower scent, and it was like a really beautiful scent or fragrance. And I'm like, of course, there's barely any plants because I'm in the desert. I'm in the high desert, Western Nevada, and I'm literally like on my hands and knees smelling the plants. I was the only person up. I don't care anyway. I mean, I'm not embarrassed about anything. So I'm up there trying to see where it's coming from, and I could not find it. And there were like only a couple small shrubs and stuff, and I'm like, okay, well, to me that was an interdimensional something coming in, but it was a good
Right.
experience. And the last thing I was going to say, Trish, the only other thing that happened is I did see a cloud that did look like a disembodied head that was not really a weird one. It was probably some kind of an alien species that was floating above the top of the hillside. That was when I was getting ready to camp for the night. Kind of observing, observing but being respectful. But it wasn't anything weird or scary. So
I was gonna say back to the multidimensional, interdimensional, I guess, beings in that sense, that reminds me of, now that as a medium, since I've communicated, I don't even like to call myself that because I don't do it in the same fashion. I don't go out seeking spirits to communicate with for the purpose of contacting people's deceased relatives and things like that at all. I get information from spirits or interdimensional beings, uh, based on a um, completely mutual feedback, if that makes sense. Nothing from likes being manipulated. And so um, I do have, issues. I experience that so much. My conflict of interest in that in the paranormal field, to an extent, because um, with the dimensions, when you start, there are some darker entities that could be of a higher dimension than yourself, or myself, whoever. But they're able to go back as well. So what if these giants being labeled as cannibals, what if they were higher dimensional dark beings? And as you said, once when they fall through the dimension, if you can only see, and if you're stuck in that dimension, then yes, it would look like cannibalism. But to them, it's literally feeding on something's life force, their chi. But it reminds me of Alice in Wonderland, actually, one of the older ones where, like, I don't even know. I mean, this was like one of the original ones where she goes through another door and everything's flat. Like even all the villains and stuff, they're flat, like paper
Oh yeah, I
dolls
forgot
and
about that.
stuff. Yeah, that's what it made me think of, because and then she goes through another one and she's the giant, and she accidentally, like, she tries not to step on other, it's, I say that is no different. I've said that before. I've probably taken out entire civilizations of ants, um, without even realizing it. And to them,
Oh
who
yeah.
knows? I might be in their stories, and their grandchildren and other generations, as the red-headed giant that took out an entire town or civilization, and I was the beast. It depends on perspective and whose story it is. And none of them, if you go by that theory, then none of them are actually wrong. It's like a person who's colorblind looking at the same thing that someone who's not is. That person that's colorblind isn't lying when they tell you what they see. It's just different than the other.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I actually have an interesting story about fire ants. Really quickly. The
Oh,
second
fire
night.
ants.
I actually have two stories about. You probably have more than as many as I do, probably, Trish, right?
They're evil.
Okay, I'll just say really quickly. I think it was the second night of my trip last year or last summer, and I was in Mississippi, which is a very, very powerful spiritual place. I mean, we're in the Gulf of Mexico. There was a lot of what they call the Mississippian culture over there. Lots of Indian mounds and stuff like that, and lots of clay, actually, lots of like red clay.
Mississippi mirrors, and the Mississippi River mirrors Egypt.
Exactly, exactly. And you and me have talked about that off the air before too. Looking for the corollaries on one side of the Atlantic versus the other side of the Atlantic. Well, and we see, Mississippi has ISIS right in the middle of the word. So how did that happen? And I actually recommend highly people, if you go to my YouTube channel, under the educational videos section, there's a video from the channel called Old World Florida. It's about the Fertile Crescent actually being the Gulf of Mexico. And it's one of the most important things I've ever found in terms of ancient history. And it's a must watch for people if you want to check that out. So, yeah, and then it gets a lot weirder too, because of course, you know how much research I've done with the LDS tradition and Joseph Smith. And Joseph said that the original Garden of Eden was in Jackson County, Missouri. And the first time I saw that, I literally put it in the trash can. I didn't even know what to do with that. Like, I had no basis for understanding what he talked about. So guess what I did? Well, I did several things. I read the text. I read the original text that revelation was contained in, which is called Doctrine and Covenants. separate from the Book of Mormon. And actually, if you're going to read one, you really need to read both. And I thought when I first read the Book of Mormon 10 years ago, I thought, oh, that's probably enough. Well, it's really not. You need both to understand the full picture. But I just read Doctrine and Covenants right before my trip last year, and he's talking about all these revelations and things that he got in terms of where these people, where the ancient Jewish people, when they lived in the Americas, where they lived, specifically where they lived, talks about Lamanites and Nephites and all this stuff. And by the way, Nephite is very similar to the word Nephilim. I would just like to highlight that because no one ever highlighted that to me. And now I think
Yeah.
about it. Now I think about it differently when I read through the Book of Mormon, which, by the way, I'm about to start again in about a week, and I'm very excited about it because I haven't read it for 10 years. And most of my trip last summer was doing research on the LDS Church and, of course, Joseph Smith's revelations and prophecies. I followed his entire life, all the way from where he was born in Vermont, all the way to where he was martyred or killed in Illinois, Carthage Jail in Illinois. And it was something very interesting. It's really close to me because, and I try to explain this to my missionary friends in the LDS Church a lot, that Joseph Smith, first of all, he was born on the same line of longitude that I was born on, which is to me highly significant when you're talking about energy grid lines and stuff that go across the earth. And we talk about this too, Trisha, different energy in the land depending on where you go across the planet, of course.
Yes.
And so he, and when I get communication, it tends to be very anonymous, and it's just like something, just a piece, sometimes whole folios of information will just drop into my head at the same time as a fully formed story or picture, and then I can start to actually flip through it in my mind and see what I want to do with that. But he communicated with me and said, Dave, I want you to see my life. I want you to see what I saw and what I did before this became a religion. This is before the LDS Church, before the RLDS, which is now called the Community of Christ, which is another Book of Mormon church, before the Church of Christ, before all of this stuff happened. He wanted me to see the real story, and get the energy in the land and experience what happened. Go to the places he had revelations and all this stuff. And sure enough, they are very, very spiritually strong. It's not something I go in.
Did
Well,
you
and it's
go
not
to
something.
St. Joseph?
Yeah, I went through.
Missouri?
I went through St. Joseph on my way back from Kansas after coming
Okay.
to Topeka, actually, and I
It's
went
kind
through
of
that.
north of northwest of Kansas City.
Exactly. Yep. I'll tell you something interesting about that is that when I left, I think I mentioned this to you, but and you guys have to know geography a little bit, but you can always just pull up Google Maps. It's not hard to do. But when I left Atchison, Kansas, it's on the Missouri River, correct, Trish? I think it's in Missouri.
Yes, it's right. And you
Okay.
cross the bridge and then you're in Missouri. Yeah, they have the big.
Okay, so I was on the banks of the Missouri River on the Kansas side in Atchison, and I went past the Sally House, which you've talked about a lot. I was standing in front of the door, and I felt totally fine. Again, I was surprised. I had my EMF detector, and sometimes you have to. I think it's entity specific to the specific person, whether they recognize you and whether you recognize them. Sometimes I found that. So anyway, I was totally
It's like the basement. It's the underground tunnels. Because I
okay.
felt
Well, I didn't go in
fine
the
on the
basement.
street. It's actually
Okay.
when you go downstairs in any of those houses or locations.
Okay.
Which is in the earth. So I mean that makes sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there's been a lot of there's actually I believe it was if I'm not mistaken, it's been a long time since I've seen this. I think it's the Sharon Tate story from California. I believe Los Angeles. You probably know about that. Charles Manson, I believe. I think it's that story. I want to say 2 houses over from where she was killed. There's some really strange anomalies in the ground. And it was only when they got into the bedrock, like in the basement, and it was like the corner of the basement, just like this weird stuff going on, and things went crazy haywire. Yeah. Well,
Stop it.
all right.
I was just okay. When I got home from work tonight, I have this I haven't actually completely moved yet. And my basement is the creepiest thing. I don't go down there. But it's connected. So in Topeka, everyone knows there's tunnels connecting everything.
Yep.
Um, Pretty much from the Capitol branching out. And um but when I came home, I'm like, why do I want to listen to Marilyn Manson? Like, of all things, beautiful
Wow. Okay.
people. Like, and you just went, anyway, it's gone.
Well,
So
you of
now I'm
course.
gonna have thanks, Dave. I'm gonna have nightmares. My
Well,
basement's already creepy.
I've never even brought that story up on a show before, so man, we're on a very similar frequency. Like this stuff happens to me every day as well,
Yes.
and I think it happens to Trish. Actually, I think it happens to you even more than me, Trish, which is surprising to
Oh,
me.
all the time. All the
Oh
time,
yeah,
I tell
it's
you.
it's like
This
you don't
is
get a
never
break.
ending.
Yeah, like you don't get a break. I do get breaks for sometimes a couple days if I'm lucky, which to most
I
people
know.
would be like, oh, but you don't get any breaks. So anyway, yeah, it's associated with I would say like the telluric currents, which are the Earth currents. It may
Mhm.
have been one of the other things I think about, and I know some people don't like the story. They don't like to go there. I think about Tartaria and stuff like that. I think about possible buried civilizations. I think about petrification of biological organisms in rock, that people are trapped in rock.
So you just mentioned the Tartarian, right? Okay. Remember, I don't know. Did you go down in the basement at the Capitol?
In Kansas, yeah,
So remember, in the
it's
basement,
weird.
there's posters of, um, excuse me, world and county fairs. That's all that's down there on the walls. Is it's all vintage posters of fairs. Like, for other people, I don't know if other parts of the world have like county fairs or things like that.
Oh yeah,
I'm not
oh yeah.
sure.
We had a
Um,
we had a we had a four we had a four town fair actually where I grew up. So I think it's the same county. But
well, but
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I don't know if that's if they do that in other countries.
Oh, I
Um,
don't know.
but but regardless, that's part of the Tartarian theory. Is they draw a whole little town to a fair and then destroy just reset, wipe out everything, like build it up overnight, like nothing ever happened or it didn't exist. And so one of the times I was taking pictures at the Capitol and saw that's the first thing I thought of when I saw all of those fair pictures. I was like, no, no way,
Yeah, right.
no way. Um, so I go back and forth of being conflicted to whether or not any of this is real. Whether it's completely, if it's all holographic, which has been stated many, even government theories. There's even been a project based on that in the past. I covered that one time. So um, that's one of the things I was going to say. I forgot about this because it's something I had been researching um, recently. All I wrote on it though, which is weird. Um, you spoke of I you know probably way more about them than I do. The Nephilim, right?
Hmm.
How do you pronounce it?
Yeah, that's how I say it. Yep. Some
So
people
those
say
were known as the
some people say
giants, right?
Nephilim. Yeah.
Right. Those were known as the giants, right? Um, and the Anunnaki. So Anu means heavens. Um, Ki means earth. So in other
Those who from the heavens came.
none or noon means chaos. So there you have heavens, chaos, earth. So basically, it's the Anunnaki would be like the in between, right?
Yeah, or the intermediaries coming between
Right.
the dimensions. Yeah.
And the chaos. So I always thought that was interesting that nobody ever mentions those, puts that together. Um, when discussing that. And that's, I mean, and then you go back to different kings when it comes to like the Anunnaki and things like that. King Saul was first human king. Okay. SOL is soul, but it's also representation of the sun.
Yep.
Yeah. So there
And
was,
and the word Solomon is the sun and the moon,
yep. Um
or the soul of man. The
there
temple that
was,
was built without hammer is your
yeah,
body.
so that goes back to like the oh my gosh, the Egyptian Ankh is the house represented the house of life or soul, right? Um and so that even, and then you get into like the Sumerian kings and such, and how many years they ruled. But people nowadays, and when they write about these things, they say it's in human years terms, like 6 to 36 years or something. But in actuality, they, from what I've deciphered from that, many of them had rulings. There were what, 23 kings, they said, that ruled from it for like 30,000 years. Um, there's different, and the only way that anyone or being or entity or anything could do that, they would have to be interdimensional, you know, to rule, some of them up to 241,000 years. That's
Well, what's interesting about that to me, because of course I do a huge amount with Eastern biology, Eastern medicine, principles of Eastern medicine, fluid circulations, fasting. I mean, you name it, prana, chi, chakras, all of it, kundalini. It's all the part of the same system. But the thing about that is there's secrets in the human body that have been repressed on purpose. And then a lot of it has been the fact that humans have just gotten so stupid that we can't even understand it. There's a lot of
oh
a
yeah,
lot of components
yeah,
coming in. But in addition to that, Trish, in addition to that, you've got, of course, Noah, you've got Methuselah, you've got Enoch, all of which
yeah,
who lived at least like 800, 900 years long. And it's not,
yeah,
what I was taught, and when I was going to, well, for me, as far as I'm concerned, unfortunately, but when I went to catechism in the Catholic Church when I was a kid, they said, "Oh yeah, that's just like a metaphor." It's not a metaphor. And I believe that's actually true. In the King's List, I believe that's true numbers and all this stuff. But there's a couple things I want to say about that. Is one, there are secrets to the human body that would theoretically allow a human to do that. And since we just
oh yeah, absolutely.
constantly, yeah, and we constantly eat all the time, probably in this country, 75% of which is actually like plastic that you're eating and like heavy metals and stuff. It's not
And
actual food.
metal, yeah,
Oh, yeah. Yep. Absolutely. So that's part of it. And then the real teachings you're going to find over in the East in the Ayurvedic traditions. And I found them in only two places on this planet, India and China. I have not spent time researching the Korean traditions. So I would assume that they kind of get it too. I would assume that they kind of understand it. But anywhere else you go, it's like all they're talking about, and it's fine. It's interesting. They're talking about alchemy. They're talking about stories of like Osiris and Jesus ascending and all that. But it's like, again, of
hmm
course, we mentioned at the beginning of the show, Trish. I want the data. Like, give me the
yeah,
chemical
yeah.
equations and stuff. I want to see what we can work with here. I don't want metaphor. So if you want the real stuff, you go over to the East. And
Well, and
the
one of
last
the
thing I want,
things,
yeah, good.
oh no, I was just gonna say, um, we're either producing or we're consuming as humans nowadays, and we shouldn't actually be doing either just to live, technically. I mean, would we live much longer if we weren't doing either, So, because we work ourselves to death, and then we can, between, you know, overconsumption financially and spiritually and physically and everything we do, because that's all we know in this
Right.
culture, in this society. Um, so
Yeah. So there's that, and then another very important point here, which is the fact that we don't. This always is irritating to me because scientists, career scientists who are being paid for a narrative to try to tell people this is how. Okay, you know what? I'll make my own decision, man. You tell me what you think it is, and I'm going to
mhm,
decide what I think it is, and everyone else who's intelligent is going to decide what they think it is. So no, don't push your agenda. I cannot stand that crap.
yes,
I have to give people heat a lot of times these days because I'm like, dude, that's what you think, okay? That's what you think. And by the way, I've got good data, and that's not, all I heard from you was an opinion, okay? So I go with that stuff. But what I want to say too is that we don't, and what I was going to reference is carbon 14, the C14 testing, is that they say, oh, and by the way, from what I understand is it's not very accurate within the last 500 years. It's only after that. So people are getting dates back. You get, and a lot of this happens on Oak Island. Of course, people know my work. They know I follow it very closely. I was involved with it in 2017 and 2018 a little bit. The thing is, though, is like it gives percentages that this is what it is. So it's like 25% from 1715 to 1845 or something, and like what or 67% here. It's like, okay, well, it could be in the 20% what's coming back. It could be like you're saying it's in the 67 percentile or whatever, but we don't know it. And the thing that really
mhm,
irritates me is that we cannot prove, as far as I'm concerned. I'm willing to debate anyone on this. Seriously, if people have more information on this than me, absolutely. I want to put it out there though, is that we don't know that carbon 14 decays at a constant rate through the millennium. And we don't know that because we weren't there. We weren't alive 2,000 years ago.
right,
So one of the things I've suggested, even for the pyramids and all of this stuff, and for the massive plants and animals that used to or claim to have used to have lived here, which is, again, that's a conspiracy possible topic as well. Some people don't think the dinosaurs ever existed. They think that they've been created to look that way. It's a very interesting topic, actually, very interesting topic. But the thing about it is that if, let's say, the conditions on Earth are different, which I know we're going through it right now. I know they change. They change dramatically, and they can change overnight depending on what's happening astrologically, among other things. And I do want to touch on that before the end of the show too, Trish. What we've just been through in March has been really, really extreme in terms of astrology. I've never felt anything like that in my life. What just happened past 30 days, and I've lost people to all kinds of weird stuff. They've changed. Some people have gotten cancer. There's all kinds of really, really intense stuff happening right now. And I'll
yeah,
try to explain. Well, I'll try to explain the why if you want to get into that a little bit. But we don't know what the conditions were. We can't even prove that the physics are the same as they are now. Scientists like to say things are always consistent through the ages and the laws are always the same. And I say, well, I don't believe that necessarily, because laws are created through consciousness. The consciousness
right,
changes the grid. The consciousness changes the systems. But we don't know. So if let's make this last point. So if the conditions on the planet were different, which I guarantee they were thousands of years ago,
oh yeah,
even just speaking astrologically, things change, and the orientations are changing on a daily basis. And you never see that again unless you've lived hundreds of thousands of years. You're not going to see the same combination in the sky. I'm saying everything being the same in exact positionings. So the thing about it is that we don't know that maybe like if I don't even know if I believe in gravity. I'd say density usually. That's, again, another controversy. Everything's controversial.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so what?
However, a good way to explain that though, w- it so gravity for its basic purpose and theory, because most people understand that it keeps us on Earth here. Um, that's when people tell me they don't believe in something, or and I'm like, that's fine. I'm completely. There's a lot of things that I also get criticized because people are like, well, you said this a few months ago and now you believe something different. Of course, my beliefs change 100% almost every single day based on my experiences. because it's things that I didn't know. And you only, you only know what you know until you know different. And as you just said, this moment, even if time didn't exist, this, as we are right now, will never exist again in the same exact fashion, because it, so I think people get confused on the theory of even like quantum physics and relativity and things like that, because if you say things can't exist again, that's true in that same fashion. However, if you argue that everything that will ever exist already does, then that's conflicting information, unless, like you said, you demonstrate how that can happen. And I think one of the big, I think that's why people are so conflicted and in chaos right now, because opinions are starting to change, about everything, because our world is
Yeah.
so different than what it was even 2 years. And I don't mean, yes, everything's different. I mean, to the extreme of what it was a few years ago. It's changing at a much faster pace, I guess, than before. And so, um, I forgot what I was going to say on that, but there was someone that I was going to thank Justin real quick for. Yes, he said we do have county fairs in the rest of the world, as we did from days of yore, long before USA existed. Yeah, I see. So
That's good
thank
to
you
know.
for
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I had no idea. Um,
Yeah, I want to add really quick, Trish, the density slash gravity thing, whatever you want to call it, I don't even really care, whatever people feel comfortable with. But the idea for me is that back in the day, I'm talking like thousands, maybe not even thousands, maybe several hundreds of years ago, is that, let's say that like the conditions of the gravity or density changed, meaning that it's not pressing as hard on your body. And I noticed, actually, by the way, in 2012, I stepped outside one day. I'm like, wow, and I didn't really know what ether was back then, but like the invisible grid around my body felt different. Everywhere I was
right.
walking, I'm like, it feels like the veils have been lifted, and it felt a lot more dangerous. Actually, it felt like the insulation had been removed and everything was exposed. That's what it felt like starting 2012 for me. So what I'm
Yeah.
saying is that if it's pressing on your body differently, then because of that, I would argue that the conditions of the biological organism change, because things respond to physics and they respond to pressure and density and stuff like this, and on a volume, all these basic concepts in science. So we may not have even had to have done extreme measures. The natural lifespan may have been 800 or 900 years because of the conditions on the planet. If they're less extreme and they're more hospitable to life, then that could, in my opinion, could actually make it so that you could live without us doing anything different. You could live longer just because the conditions are different. So I think we should include that when we think about these things.
I think there's things that contribute to, for instance, CERN Corporation, Cerner. Um, I was driving on a dirt road one time, and for whatever reason, intuitively, I stopped and I took a picture. I don't know if I showed you this or not. I took a video of the moon, just random, Um, and right before that, my daughter said, "Yep, it's just like we lost gravity." I mean, she's very intuitive too, but out of nowhere, that comes out of her mouth. Well, in this video, on the stretch of, I don't know, maybe half a mile, and it's time stamped. So within a matter of like 30 seconds, it literally looks like the moon falls from the sky. Okay, well, you can argue that that's not what I was basing my research on. However, because you can argue that perspectives of, the moon looks bigger, further away, looks like it's falling to some, there could be so many different explanations for that. But that specific day at that specific time was when CERN Corporation um, restarted their oh my gosh, I
The
did all this.
hadron, the
Yes,
hadron collider.
yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, and it has been scientifically proven that if that if it were to knock the moon off of its course, even by, I mean, a tiny, tiny amount, Earth would lose gravity, even for like a millisecond. And that would change our entire makeup. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, right.
that would change everything.
And
Um,
not to mention, outside of physical laws, you're also talking about astrological laws.
mhm,
And part of what's happened this month is that it's shaken people so hard because what happens in your chart is you got your birth chart and then you have the daily transits. The birth chart
right.
is what was in the sky at the moment you're born. The daily transit was happening on that day. And when you put them in, it's called a biwheel. When you put them together, the different angles they're creating between your personal chart in your body and what's happening on that day will actually change the mechanisms in your body and your
Yes.
brain. So
Yes.
it's like, why am I losing? Why do I feel like I'm losing my mind? Well, look what's going on in your chart. I try to,
Biorhythms. Absolutely.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but on those specific days that I had, and since it was dated and time stamped, I could correlate that with something scientific that humans were actually doing to that would have an impact and affect the universe and our environment. And numerous people, myself included, around me, people that I knew, all of a sudden, everyone's eardrums were bursting. People were, their ears were bleeding, all across the world for that matter.
What day was that, Trish? Do you know?
I'll have to look back.
Okay.
It was last year, I believe. Last year or the year before. But it was in the fall. It was like September maybe. Um, and so of course, then I researched, dive more into that. One of the first symptoms on humans, if the Earth were to be knocked off course and lose gravity, even for a very minute amount of time, one of the first symptoms in a human would be their eardrums rupturing due to the, obviously biologically, the pressure and everything. So that, to me, well, first of all, it pissed me off because, one, why do a few wealthy scientists get to determine the future and the path of the entire universe, for that matter, and the Earth? And why is nobody paying attention to that? And um, where are they located? Like Norway, Sweden?
I believe it's in Switzerland, if I'm not mistaken. It's
Yeah,
on
I think
a lake
so.
near a lake in Switzerland, I believe, below the ground.
And that has so much more impact on everything, on our world, uh, on the universe, on everything, especially if you know anything about the atomic makeup of anything, which most people don't. Most people do not know your basic the science of protons, neutrons, and atoms. And so I feel that's what I'm going to start doing. I'm going to start designing like scientific courses based on like the for third graders or something, because you have to do that nowadays. You have to break things down. I'm not saying, well, you did, yes, people, we're dumbing ourselves down because we become so codependent on everything, on computers and on, kids aren't reading anymore, and they're not even, they don't have to research anything. They can just have computers do it, or calculators, or what have you. And so I think that's actually going to be the the end of humankind, is we don't know how to do anything for ourselves. So maybe that's how people's like
Yeah.
brains got smaller. It's one of those things like you don't use it, you lose it.
Right, right. Well, I think we need the leaders to do it too, and it's
Oh,
taken me
absolutely.
my it's taken me my entire life to find people that I mean, to be completely honest, Trish, you're one of the only people that I can have a conversation like this with. I think through my mind bank and I'm like, who can I even do this with? And some of the people who I thought I could, I've actually since lost, not necessarily to death, but like something's happened in their brain or like their life, they just
Yes.
went off the deep end. So like I actually it's quite sad, but I'm losing people all the time now, whether it's to death or to something dramatically shifting in their mind where it's not possible to work with them anymore, or they can't think clearly or whatever. The list is getting smaller and smaller. So what it is for me is like, and I think you probably, you tell me what you believe for yourself, obviously, but for me, I'm happy to be one of the leaders. But like, you got to come and like participate, be part of the channel, ask questions, sign up for services, all this stuff. And because if you see, I've always been able to do this, is if I see someone who I think is doing a great job, I go over and I support them. I go over and I send them a message. I'm sending someone new at least once a week a message on some kind of platform, either saying, "Oh man, you're doing a great job. I support you. I'd like to learn more," or whatever it is. And that's how you build a community. But if you have someone who's in a leadership position and you don't have people, lining up to say, "Oh, I want to learn more about this," then I can't really do much more, And a lot of
Yeah.
people can't. We can put it out there, but we need participation from everyone to make it, for instance, to make it like a movement or to turn it into a movement. And I'm not
And
the person. I'm not.
well, and I've talked about that on this show because so my numbers, Joe was saying last week, I was a guest on his show on Wednesday,
Mhm.
and he's like, Trish is like, as far as her energy, she just puts a beacon out there to the world and attracts everything, good and bad, which is true. And I don't intentionally do that. But the numbers on my show have grown. And as I've always said, that's not necessarily why I'm here. That's not the importance. Yes, it is to be able to reach as many people as I can. But as far as an ego side, that doesn't really matter to me. And I don't think people realize when I say I need to know if you like the content I cover, if you want me to cover more of it, or if it doesn't even matter. Because in my own life, as you know, I'm going to keep doing this. I don't research things for. I mean, yes, I do it for other people as well because I want to share the information, the knowledge that I find out, and things like that. But if nobody cares about that, I would still continue to research things for myself, whether anybody else, existed in my reality, just
Exactly.
to grow my own, to grow um mentally and increase my own knowledge just for myself. And I think that's the difference. You can tell there's so many out there nowadays that are just mass producing books and um especially with AI now, mass producing books and thing that because they want the credibility, you know, and without taking the time to actually research and produce fact-based evidence on their findings, that they're putting out there. So it's such a massive amount of information. It's overwhelming. I'm sure to people at times, if you don't know where to look or if you're looking in the wrong place.
Oh, definitely. Well, I also believe things happen the way they're supposed to, whether it's how I want it to go or not. I'm just happy to, anyone who's interested in it, anytime someone subscribes or says or sends me a message or something, I'm actually overjoyed. It's not about numbers to me either. It's about let's try to figure this out, guys. And then
Yes.
I'm a very action oriented person. I want to do something about it with the information that we have. I'm not reading. I mean, I've read literally almost 20 books this winter. Fall between the fall and winter, I believe I've read almost 20 books. And so people want to know, hey Dave, why aren't you, what are you up? Guys, I'm literally sitting in my chair. I've got my book open, and then I've got like 20
Yeah,
tabs open on my phone on
I
Google
am.
Chrome or whatever. And then sometimes they disappear. Speaking about AI, Trish, sometimes I'm not kidding. When I wake up, they're not there anymore.
Yeah.
They've disappeared off of my internet page, and I'm like, all right, to me that's the AI thing coming in and messing with us. But the thing
That's
is
why
that
I write things down and I keep
yeah,
like I have notepads and post-it notes and everything all over the place because I don't trust I'm not even gonna say that out loud because then like my toaster will be trying to kill me tomorrow or something like
yeah, right. No, well, if it's important enough, if it's really important, I do write it down for sure immediately. Absolutely immediately. And sometimes, like, if it's like 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning and I have to go to sleep, I look through my tabs and I'm like, okay, if is there something in here that if it magically disappears by itself, I'm not kidding, that I would be devastated. And if there is, I bookmark it. If there's not, then I just let the universe do what it's going to do. And I usually
Yeah.
I circle back around to it at some point in the future, you know. I did want to say something about flat Earth though, because I know a lot about that topic. And also, if people want to check out the flat Earth presentation I did on my YouTube channel, please go check that out. I think it's under 2023 podcasts, the playlist that I have. You'll see it down there. It's in the title. It says Flat Earth Theory, I believe. Go check that out. I put together what I think are the best proofs of that idea, and you know, I spent a lot of time with it because it's a hot topic, it's important, and also because essentially all of the ancient religions and cultures said it was flat. You know, it's not just someone coming out and saying that. It's in the Quran, it's in the Bible, it's in the Norse mythology, it's in Sumerian mythology, Egyptian mythology, Southwest Native American
See,
mythology.
and I always try to think of everything in different, every possible way. So so initially I was like, okay, maybe if they didn't have flight technology or spaceship technology, things that we have now, um, and they're going by what they actually physically see, just a simple on a physical basis with their eyes. And someone goes and stands on top of the highest mountain and they say, okay, what can you see? Does it start getting round somewhere? And they just see flat. Well, of course, I'm like, okay, maybe, because you, if you go, except I can't say if they weren't as advanced, because it seems to me the more I learn is that we're the least advanced,
Hmm.
you know, of any of them, because we're the least connected. So that theory's changed as well. But on a simple note, that's what I initially thought. Maybe due to not being able to see it literally from a different angle, they were just seeing it as being flat.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it could totally be that. The other thing, I'll bring up two really easy ones for people, and please go watch the show I did because it has everything in there, and all the most what I think are the most important points. I wanted to condense it for people, and that's also what I'm trying to do on my channel is to condense the topic, whatever the topic is. And what I do, and you'll
Mhm.
appreciate this, I think, a lot, Trish, because of your astrological sign. But I put everything on the table that's valid and
Yeah.
I spend a little bit of time with in every topic, even the ones I don't like, you know, because I try to be neutral as possible, and then I let people decide what they think it is, and I have my opinion about it, you know, based on the facts and stuff. But here's a big thing in terms of even population control and stuff like that is that if you withhold like half of the potentially valid explanations, that's equivalent to in some ways lying to me. You know,
Mhm.
it's like if you're not showing people that it could also be this. Like we need to do that in
Right.
public schools as well. It's like, you know, apart from you know, inciting riots in society and stuff, I'm not advocating for that, but I'm just saying like don't try to drive your narrative and ignore an entire concept or, you know, for instance, astrology was never mentioned in public school for me. And you know what you could do, and I say this all the
I don't
time.
think it was for me either. I think the first time it might have been college before I took any type of, and that was through mythology.
Hmm. I had a Greek and Roman mythology course in college, Trish, that changed my life. It was in Boston, actually, where I went to college. In addition, and it was talking about entheogens and the psychedelic mushroom and all of these things, and how that was very much a part of their religious ceremonies and things. Um, you know, mushroom cults and Christianity and all this stuff going on. You know, to change your consciousness and just amazing things going on. But I started to think about it differently, and at the same time, I had a cosmic evolution course, science course. I was
Oh
taking those
wow.
together, and it expanded everything I thought about mythology and
I'm
consciousness. And
sure. I don't even think they
oh,
offered that here because I mean, I'm in like the Bible Belt, you know, like
right.
that wouldn't be something offered. I went to KU initially, the University of Kansas, so um I
Well,
don't
what's
even remember that we had anything like that. I mean, it's been, well, that was like 20 years ago. They probably do now, but
Yeah, and what's brilliant about this is what we have going on now on the internet is that you can access all this stuff. I mean, you can be in
yes.
rural nowhere and like take your like set up. I mean, you could
Mhm.
set up your own educational itinerary for yourself and say, okay, I'm going to spend an hour a day with this one and an hour a day with this one. And the important thing, like you'd mentioned, Trish, is to find people that you feel like you can trust. And I'm never above information coming in. I'm saying it could be a challenge, or it could just be like, have you thought of this? And if I haven't, I'll let them know I haven't. And then I spend an hour, probably that night, even though I don't have time for it. I've got my bookmarks piling up and all this stuff. I'll never catch up. But the
I
point
don't
is,
think
is
people
that
understand that. I mean, I know you do and I do because that's my lifestyle, but
you're
when
right.
people say they don't have time because they have to go to work and school and do this and that, no. I think what Dave and I are referring to, like, there are so many things that I feel the need to know and learn at that I spend every waking, like, I have to force myself to have the discipline to do other things in my life, exercise. Well, even when I'm exercising, I'm either like reading something, listening to something, whatever. But I'm talking about like I have to force myself to have balance to spend time, which I spend a lot of time with my kids. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying every other waking moment, literally for me, is spent researching things and learning, I guess, increasing my knowledge. So when
Yeah,
people tell
absolutely.
me that they're bored in life or whatever, or bored, or they're able to watch 35 episodes of Grey's Anatomy and that's fine if you watch TV or whatever. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying if you're bored, like I don't know, I don't understand the concept of boredom. I'm never bored. There's always something to go outside, explore, see, learn, do whatever. Like I don't even in your own backyard. Most people don't even know what exists in their own city or state or whatever. So it's crazy to
Yeah.
me. But I don't think people understand that when we say we don't have time. I don't mean we don't have time. Like there's not enough time in a day. There's not enough time in a lifetime to learn everything there is to know about the world.
Yeah, and I think what it's become about, I agree with you 100%. I think what it's become about for me, especially the past like 3 years, because I just don't have time for all the topics. I'm interested in everything, like much like you are, Trish, obviously. So it's about where's humanity? What do I have to know to help or to assist bring humanity where we need to go? And so that's what I'm focused on. I'm focused a lot on timelines and dimensions, and of course astrology, and even all those three together. I mean, take one of them. That's plenty for your whole lifetime. I'm trying to do as much as possible to bring an understanding to it. And I think it's quite logical how I go through things. I'm not like throwing things out of nowhere. I'm trying to bring explanations that actually make sense. Very rarely do I say something. It's like, "Hey, what are you talking about?" I'm like, "Okay, well, let me explain what I'm talking about." And I've got like about you do too, Trish. You got the books and the texts and the references and all this stuff. Let me show you. Of course, if people have an attention span of 5 minutes, I don't have time to show you. So you got to be able to dial in as well. And I'll go through the whole
I'm
presentation,
sorry.
show you, yeah, let's show you what I'm talking about and all this stuff. I think you do a great job. But anyway, I just want to address the flat Earth really quickly. Go check out that the show I did on that on my YouTube channel, please, because it's going to give you a really good basis, and then do what you want from there. But I just want to say a couple things. One, the pictures that have been taken of Earth, there's a lot of argument that's been through a fisheye lens, like a convex or a concave lens. So that's
Mhm.
what's bending it. That's what's making it look like it's a sphere.
Right.
That's an important one for me to really spend some time thinking about that. The other one is this one's probably the most important one, and I always use the same description of a snow globe. It's what you have, of course, at Christmas time with Santa Claus and the reindeer and the falling snowflakes and all this stuff. And we know it's a dome. We know most of us know what they look like, and you shake them and stuff like this. Okay, so if you're looking through that, we know I don't think I've ever seen a snow globe where the bottom of it was like curved. It's like a flat bottom, and it's like a diorama when you were in in like middle school. You know what I'm talking about,
No,
Trish?
it's like so I always thought this about snow globes. Their silhouette looks like a keyhole.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. Absolutely. If you're looking at it from the side, you're saying kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if you have say you're looking at most all of them I've seen, they have a flat bottom, snow globes, but what is curved is the top of it. So when you look through
Yeah.
the top of it, it makes the bottom look like it has some kind of angular dimensions that are not actually there, not there or whatever. So what I've suggested, and based on how I teach cosmology, and I have a ton of stuff again on that on my channel as well, the cosmic axis and how specifically the spheres, they're called the spheres. I teach a 10 sphere system above, 10 spheres below. Those are the 10 heavens above the earth, 10 hells below the earth. And what you mentioned previously is some very strong entities in the higher energy, lower dimensions. So the higher energy
Right.
hells, they're going to feel very powerful, but they're not angelic beings, or they're not
Yeah.
heavenly beings, which would be coming from above.
Because
So
it's
what?
what? It's just the fifth dimension, or not fifth, sorry, sixth dimension. Beings are able to take on different forms. You have your shifters and your,
Mhm.
kind of parallel universes, really, that allows them to see multiple possibilities for everything. Which is
Oh, absolutely.
actually where I always thought that people who were more like neurodivergent or like autistic or whatever, like myself, uh, I always thought that maybe that's where we came from and why it's so difficult to live in this world because you give me one word, one picture, one whatever piece of information, and my mind just like starbursts into every possible form of that one thing automatically. And it is, and then that's where you get your sensory overload and everything else, because I never realized until I started understanding that not everybody sees it that way. Not everyone experiences all of those things at once. And that was very hard for me to understand because I thought that happened to everybody my entire life. Um, and it doesn't. And that's very interesting. So I think if you look at things like that, then it helps us to understand not only each other, but um, the way others see the world. And none
Yeah,
of it's not wrong. It's just different.
oh, definitely. And it depends on your particular vantage point, of course. And
Right.
so, and I always try to bring it back to a moral standpoint. And what I always tell people is do the right thing. Okay. And
Yes.
you're going to be okay. And even if it's weird or feels weird or whatever, I believe the universe records your actions in addition to what's in your heart and your intentions and your motives and stuff like that. So one of the things I've been dealing with, especially the past couple of years, is like I actually, and I'm being completely honest, I don't know who is who anymore. I don't know
Mhm.
if I'm talking to a biological organism, a mix between a biological organism, some kind of hybrid AI, full AI, a clone, a demon, an alien. I don't know what's going on anymore. But this is what I do know. I say this all the time: is that I know how to treat other sentient beings,
Yes.
and I set the boundaries, and I say, look, man, I'll be willing to talk with you, but you gotta understand this is what I represent, this is what I believe in, and if they don't agree to respect that the boundary, then I say we're not going to be interacting. But I believe there's a lot of other beings that are actually just as confused and lost as we are. Some of them may be transitioning between dimensions and stuff. And I don't care if you're hideous looking, you look like a monster or whatever. If you come to me with humility, and I would expect the same thing of myself coming to say an angel, and I come with humility and basically I'm not trying to manipulate the situation or to try to bring any kind of evil factor into anything. And I'm saying, please, like, I need help understanding what's going on. I'm trying to be a better person, all this stuff. I believe they will help you. And I will help, say, beings who maybe have less consciousness than myself, whether they're human or animal or something even different than that. And I don't care what you look like. I don't care what your life's, where you've been and all this stuff. I care about helping consciousness to elevate. And we have to be open to and I'm like this too, Trish. I think you probably even more than me, but I get signals and messages from different entities and stuff like that. A lot of it usually anonymous for me, but sometimes it's directed, and I'm always willing to help them, but they have to basically express to me, I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to help other people and other plants and animals and the sentient kingdom and stuff. If you're not trying to, if it's anything, if I sense anything that's for a selfish motive, no, you're not going to have my ear probably ever again. So you better, if you contact me, you better be in line with that motive and principle. I just want to say one last thing about flat Earth too, is that the way that I teach the cosmic axis and the cosmology of the flat Earth model is that when you get above the Earth, now this is given that the Earth is a flat plane, and by the way, the word planet has plane right in the word. So
Right.
how did that happen? Okay, and then the thing is that when you get above the plane, you actually have the domes, which are also called the spheres, and they're the spheres of heaven. And then of course there's spheres that go below the Earth as well in an inverse fashion. What I teach is that when people talk about there being a spherical shape to the Earth, it's actually the sphere of the dome. So that the flat Earth is contained within a large dome. It's actually not just a dome. It's like a bubble. It's like a complete spherical well, it's more than 3D. But
Well,
it's the flat Earth is in the middle of the bubbles, and the bubbles are concentric outside of each other. So the whole system is the sphere.
yeah, and if you think of everything having, I've always seen everything and its auric presence, I guess. I even capture that in photos sometimes, and I assume that's with the technology of digital cameras now and my energy interacting with the digital cameras. And obviously you can't do that with the old school ones, but um where it transfers, you'll see like arches and colors and lines and stuff. um that's how I see those in real life, and that transfers onto those photos. It's really interesting. But as far as the oh, like it's no different than like a person's aura. Um there's different layers, and I think that sphere like you're referring to, and the different, a lot of like the heavens and things like that, that's what that is. That's basically like, it's like the earth's aura, the earth's energy basically projecting, and that's what they capture from space and telescopes and satellites and things like
Mm-hmm.
that.
And of course, I mean, you're right on point as well with the body, is that they're actually corollaries of each other. And the cosmic axis of the body is, of course, your spine, and the chakras are the dimensions and the planets. And so it's like exactly like an onion, actually, or
Yeah,
Russian nesting dolls. That
I
the
was just gonna
energy,
say that. What do they
right?
call those?
Well, I call them Russian, this papushka or something like that. I can't remember the word. But in Russia, Russia is a phenomenally interesting topic as well. Some of the stuff,
Oh
the
yeah.
ancient history back in there, we could do that sometime maybe. But the thing about it is that it's the same system. It's actually a torus field, and I'll tell you who does a great job with this is Santos Bonacci, my friend, the person that introduced me to astrology and flat Earth and esoteric biology. He's indispensable. If you guys want to check him out, it's Mr. Astrotheology. That's his YouTube
Sure.
channel. He's the one, in my opinion, that really started the current movement back in 2010, I believe. Well, no, it was like 2009, maybe something like that, in terms of really getting some of these
What was
topics
it,
out to
Mister?
people. It's called it's MR, Mr. Astrotheology. I can send it to you later if you want, Trish, but He does a
I
phenomenal
was just
job.
going to type it in the chat room.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Astrotheology. So anyway, he talks a lot about redshift, blue shift, which is well known in physics, and trying to figure out if things are moving towards you or moving away from you. And it's fairly consistent to me. It's very plausible for me to understand it that way. But the thing is that everything is energy. It moves in torus fields. So basically, the center of the torus field, which is the Earth, by the way. That's why this is such an important place. We're in the center. We're actually in the center. And even with all the heavenly dimensions and stuff, they're not in the center. We're in the center. This is between the heavens and hells. I call this purgatory. But anyway, what happens is that the energy is produced at the center, which is also called the heart. And the word earth and the word heart have the same letters, by the way. Again, how did that happen? If that's not what it is. The heart's at the center. Earth is at the center. So it projects the energy field. And what it does is it projects it, I believe it projects it up, and it arcs up. And these are concentric energy fields, I guess. It's for lack of a better term. Projects it up. When it hits the top of the dome or the sphere, it actually falls down. And then when it hits the lowest point, then it comes back up again into the center. And that's your circulating torus field like that. And the whole solar system, what I teach is that that's how it's organized, in addition to your body. And the body is a copy of the solar system, and the solar system is a copy of the body. And we each have our own solar system. We are our own walking solar systems.
Mm-hmm. It's like, and I'm in the heartland.
Exactly right.
In the heartland. They have, and there's the golden arches, or not the golden arches. Yes. Oh my goodness. That's a whole nother subject. When I was in Atchison, and I have it on video, something says there, and it points to this place called McDonald Hall, and I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? But you just answered that. The M theory is the 11th dimension, before everything would collapse after, infinity.
Mm-hmm.
And so the golden arch is McDonald's, of course, and then the clown, and yes, everything floats. So we all know that.
It's
That's actually
also
that's in my intro. I was dressed up as a clown from like it, because that theory, if you've ever watched that movie and you pay attention to the underlying theme, I guess, of it, um, even in reference to the spider and everything else, weaving, basically, um, weaving like the grid of our makeup, our entire being. Um, that was really deep, because I never thought of it that way. And of course, Stephen King um, is kind of a genius in that way of making. But most people will never see those because they're horror movies. So
exactly. I think, and you talked about he wrote that book about that train thing too in Kansas, didn't he?
yes, big boy. I took a picture of that too. It came through
Yeah.
Topeka 2 years ago, I want to say, summer before last. For the first time, it had not been commissioned, a steam engine train, since the 40s, I believe.
Okay.
So
And then there's
yeah,
also the orphan train topic, which is very interesting to me and
yeah.
related to Tartaria, the
A
repopulation.
lot of them were transported here from New York and the upper East Coast states to the Midwest. Yes. Um, and there's so many, and that's why Kansas, especially being the heartland, there are and I'm finding out more and more all the time, so many things that happen here. That's why it's called Bleeding Kansas. So um,
Yeah, it's
it's an
very
interesting.
well. The other part too, Trish, is of course about Oz, and
Oh yeah.
I had a fascination with that movie when I was a kid. It's not really a movie for kids. They're actually, to be quite honest, in my opinion, but it was
No,
shown to
it's
kids.
terrifying.
Oh yeah, yeah, but there's something going on with your region, or where the region you live now, and in relation to Oz, and circus energy, paranormal energy, cryptid energy
Yep.
specifically. I mean, you have talked about this a lot, and it does extend a fair distance. I felt it since I've literally like crisscrossed the country in grid fashion. I know the energy points very well down to 50-mile radiuses and stuff like that. I know what to expect if I enter that zone. I'll put it that way.
It goes from about it's really Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, Oklahoma, and parts of
Right.
Colorado,
Okay.
are this immediate, uh, which I've
I've
had
also
even worse experiences in Nebraska and Colorado and Oklahoma than I have in Kansas for that matter. So,
Yeah, actually, well, I went through Nebraska on my way west, and because we had talked about that, and I'm like, oh yeah, it'll be fine, Trish. I'm gonna be okay. But and before I bring that up, and I'm not sure how much time we have left, but whatever is fine with me. But Illinois, in addition, like Southern Illinois,
oh
I
yes.
felt some of that there too,
Yes.
and then you got Cape Girardeau with all the UFO stuff, and
Yep.
Mount Vernon, Illinois. I don't know if you've been through that town, but it is oppressively dark. I pulled into that town. I'm like, oh my God. Like, I can't believe people live under this blanket all the time. It's very extreme.
There's it's I'm actually gonna start traveling probably because I still haven't found a home. So I'm gonna like
Okay.
homelessly start traveling in the next few months just in my immediate like,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think I'm gonna document it because there's some places that I'm like people have no idea. Have no idea. Like it was Illinois that I came upon. I was in the middle of a blizzard and I came upon the biggest cross I've ever seen in my life out in the middle of nowhere. Like
Hmm.
somebody built a giant cross. I mean, giant, like I'll have to find a picture of it. Giant cross off the highway. And then the highway closed and I had to get off. And there's this like no tell motel that was the scariest place I've ever stayed. And I don't get scared that easily. But this place was, something like you would see out of horror movies. And um, it it's so interesting and unless you've experienced don't get me wrong, there's amazing places in the Midwest, there's absolutely beautiful places, but then there's others that are like literally something out of a movie that you wouldn't expect. So I've seen the best of but it's usually the extreme one way or the other, the of both worlds. So
One one of the things I've really keyed in on, and again, unexpected for me, but I used to try to conceive, mostly because it's easier to organize that in my mind this way, but about areas being like having certain specific regional energies, which is true generally. But there have been states, and specifically what I think of is like northern Missouri, actually. And I know there's more. I mean, I'm amazed I can even remember what I do. I mean, you too, Trish. The amount of stuff that goes through our heads every day, and not just normal stuff like
the amount of
interdimensional
stuff that
stuff.
happens in my life every day, like
Right, right. Yeah, but there's like what I would consider. Oh, where was the other place? Somewhere out west. Um,
well,
yeah, I can't
Utah
remember.
is really weird. I've
Oh
had
yeah,
quite
don't.
a few guests from Utah. I had the Rune Walker. I had and Quinn Stone. Yeah, they were both had such interesting stories of growing up in Utah. That's a whole that's a whole not just because of the Mormon history and background, but there's so many. I Utah is one of the places that I ended up in the middle of nowhere, um, probably from a military abduction, actually,
Mhm.
in the middle of the desert.
Oh yeah, it's super weird. I think it's the most between Utah and Colorado and potentially northern New Mexico is the most nefarious ET energy in the country, in my opinion. And
All
I've
of
been
New
to.
Mexico.
Oh, it was all of New Mexico. Well, you know more about that than me, so. But I'm gonna be going through the Southwest a little bit, and actually, what I'm gonna do, Trish, like you were saying, I'm actually going to take. I've never done this before. I think actually I tried to do it way in the beginning in 2008 when I first went on my first cross country trip. I had like a Rand McNally atlas, and I had a highlighter, and I was taking some notes and stuff about what I was experiencing. but I didn't have the understanding of the supernatural world at that time, like at all. That was the very beginning. I'm going to take a couple state maps of specific states, and I'm going to actually document every major road that I'm on, and I'm going to like put a pen in and see when the energy changes and shifts, and I'm going to try to come up with a better understanding of what's happening. Because if you go back to
That
that area,
what's that?
well, I was going to say, if you go back to that area and you feel the same thing you felt the first time,
Oh
then
yeah,
you can
yeah.
probably count on that being an energy local to that area. And when you're
But then
trying to
there's other
understand,
things. Like I used to get messages about uranium and plutonium in regards to Topeka, and I'm like, what is that? And it kept saying it's affecting your head. It's because I would get really bad headaches and certain. I'm like, what is that? Was
hmm
there like an asteroid or something hitting? Well, in what is it? Burlington, south of Topeka, there's it's what is it? Wolf Energy Center. It's a nuclear power plant. They provide power energy to, I don't know, half the Midwest, but obviously there's a lot of that would affect which that's a really small town, but that would affect a lot of northern Kansas.
oh, totally. And I was going to say about northern Missouri too, that I found to be a very patchwork energy grid in northern Missouri.
Mhm.
And I was very surprised because I was like, oh, you know where else it was? I think Ohio was southern Ohio, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
This is why both of us need to start writing this down on maps because I just
So
can't
I bought a
remember.
map the other day when I was going to Missouri, and my daughter, which is funny, this is exactly what I was referring to as far as our modern culture and society, and it's our own fault. We've all done it to ourselves. She asked me, she said, "What's that?" And I was like, she's almost 10. But no, people don't, unless you're from like, I don't know, the 90s and prior, people don't use maps anymore. They use GPS.
Hmm.
She's like, "Well, why are you buying a map?" I was at a gas station. I
Right.
said, "Because I don't know. I don't always use my phone, and it doesn't work half the time. GPS, anyways, it gives me the wrong directions. I want to." so,
Exactly. Yeah.
so I was actually looking, and she's like, "Huh, I've never seen one of these." Like, that
Exactly. Yeah.
that that just took me. I was taken aback because I'm like, I guess that's true. We again with the codependence thing, we haven't we're doing this to our kids, our next generations, ourselves, because they don't know any different. They've never had any experience any different. They don't know what it's like to take road trips and plot out on a map where you're going to go, so
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, but anyway, I was very surprised that even sometimes within 10 miles, the energy will dramatically shift. So I'm
oh
like
yeah.
having a great time, and I got like one hand on the wheel. I've got the window down. I feel great. And then I literally I can feel it before I get there, whether it's in the clouds or if I'm going through a valley or something like that. I'm like, oh no, I was having such a good time too. And then suddenly I come into the town. There's places that I know there's ETs there. I feel it. I feel it in the air. I feel it in the ground and all this stuff. And then what's sad, like you're saying too, is that people don't recognize a lot of times it's not them, it's the land. It's
Yeah.
actually, it could be, there's a lot of uranium in northwest New Mexico, by the way. I just
Yeah.
found that out recently. There's
Well,
a lot
I
of,
mean, they tested atomic bombs in the middle of the state
right,
pretty much. So like that,
exactly.
that
Well,
affected everything.
there's even a fair amount of uranium up in New Hampshire and Maine. And of course, I grew up in New England. And I'll tell you what, I almost took a job at a certain spot. And but when I went down there, I was kind of top of this hill, and I came down the other side of the hill. And the minute I started descending, I started to feel really not good.
Yeah.
And then I found out when I looked, again, I looked at a geological map of Maine, and I saw that that's where the uranium deposits start.
Yeah.
So like the top of the hill doesn't have them, and when I go down the hill, you can see on the map that's where they're at. And I was in the area. I felt like a nothingness. It felt like everything was dead. It was an awful feeling.
Yeah.
So
It's
it's
like
for people.
Pennsylvania too.
Oh yeah, and we've talked about that a little bit as well.
Yeah.
I've had some really, really messed up stuff happen. I think I told that story to you before in that campground in Pennsylvania. That it was the heaviest, most oppressive, uh, probably demonic energy I've ever felt in my life.
Oh yeah.
And
I've talked there's a what part of that was
what part of
what part of
Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania? Yeah.
It was like southeast. I can actually, I can tell you where it was after. I have to
Huh,
find it.
southeast.
But but what's interesting about this is that a lot of southeast Pennsylvania is there's a lot of well, I mean, even Hershey, I think Hershey's right in there, Hershey, Pennsylvania. There's a lot of agriculture. It's beautifully
Mhm.
flat fields and Amish country. It's actually very pleasant. A lot of it's very peaceful and pleasant. And then you get into this one pocket. It might be a river
Yeah.
valley, it might be a mountain pass. Like it's always different. And it's like, what is going on? This is like, and I understand most people are not going to be able to feel all of the nuances and stuff potentially like we can. But part of what I'm trying to do as well is to help people who can't feel that. And some of what I say is, even when you're trying to make a move and stuff, is pick the spot based on where you feel good. Like you just show up in the town and you're like, wow, I feel great. I don't know why. I had the
Yeah.
shittiest day and suddenly I feel great. Okay, well then it's probably in the land, or it's the people, or it's what the people are projecting, or probably all three.
Yeah. Combination.
Right.
Well, Dave, they're going to kick us off. They probably already have. It is 10:23, so we have to go. It is always a pleasure having you and talking to you. Tell everybody one more time where they can find you on YouTube and Facebook.
Yeah, sure, Trish. Thanks for having me. I love being on your show. I mean, you just do I love it. I appreciate everything you do, and you just put out great shows consistently, in my opinion.
Thank you. I literally, no one ever tells me that. No one ever says
Hmm.
anything about my show, actually. I just, like,
I love it. I
I'm like,
absolutely
I
love it
might
every
as well
time.
just quit doing it if I'm gonna. But thank you. That means a lot.
You're welcome. Yeah, if you guys want to find me, I mean, Facebook is probably the easiest to contact me. It's under Dave Petrella. I'm on Instagram, Dave Petrella12. If you want to see how I spell my last name, it's on the screen. And then my YouTube channel is also under Dave Petrella. I've got a full list of my services on my YouTube About section. Obviously, I do full Western astrology. I do spiritual guidance. I do a lot with principles of Eastern medicine and fasting and health tips and all kinds of stuff. So if you guys are interested in doing that, it would really help me out. I'm going to be setting up a Patreon in a couple days. Any support is very much appreciated. For me to continue to do shows, I do need the support. So if you're able to do that, I've got all my links down there. I think you probably post them too, right, Trish, under the show?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So it'll be easy for you guys to find, and I really appreciate it. Come over to my channel too. Subscribe if you like. I've got new stuff going up fairly frequently, and I'm going to continue, of course, doing my podcasts. And I'd love to join you whenever, Trish. So just let me know.
Oh, absolutely. And we'll have to figure out where we're both going this summer or next year, so we can meet up somewhere, do some research.
I have an idea. I'll tell you. I'll tell you in a second.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for watching. Thanks for joining us. Next week, I don't know what I'm doing from one week to the next, but thank you again to Carnation for sponsoring me as well as the network. And we have a lot of new hosts and a lot of new shows. I have not between moving, I haven't had time to check them all out, but check some of them out if you feel drawn to. And as always, be safe. Have a great week and good night, everyone. I don't know. Oh, there we go.